Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I am Sam Abu-El-Samad.
So we're starting to head into the summer doldrums. We kind of scraped a couple topics together this week. They're still good. Don't worry.
There actually was some stuff I wanted to talk about, but it turns out I'm not allowed to talk about it until September. So,
is it going to be cool when we can talk about it in September?
If I remember, yeah. Okay.
What you should do now is, and we'll wait. You can go into your Google Calendar and set a reminder. You know what? You could probably do it while we're talking about cars.
Just put it on the rundown for some time later.
So let's talk about what we're driving, though. Okay. And you had the Continental, and I'm really interested in the Continental. And you also had a LaCrosse. Then another car I'm really interested in, but the Continental this is supposed to be like the fourth time the Continental is going to be the savior of Lincoln, and they finally got a more cohesive style to it. It's derivative, I suppose, but it's a great looking car, and it seems like it's nicely finished. It's not just a sort of, a 10-footer. So what did you think?
So, yeah, the Continental, thankfully, hopefully this is the beginning of a trend for Lincoln of returning to actual names for their cars instead of, meaningless alphanumeric 3-letter codes.
I still think it would be cool if they came out with an MK Ultra, but that's just the geek in me.
Yeah, call it a Mark Ultra.
Mark Ultra, okay. All right.
Go back to that designation. The MKS is dead, and the Continental takes its place. And a few years back, I guess somewhere around 2013 or so, around the time that the current generation Ford Fusion was debuting, there were a whole bunch of spy photos floating around of development mules for the car that was supposed to replace the MKS. And it was going to be based on a stretched version of the Fusion and MKZ platform. And the photos, we saw at that time, those mules that were running around, they had a grill, it still had, had another version of the split bow wave grill, which apparently nobody really liked very much. And it was, kind of a longer, sleeker version of the MKZ. And that whole thing basically got trashed, and they started over again. They brought in David Woodhouse to lead Lincoln design, and they came up with a whole new design language for Lincoln, which in many respects is arguably kind of derivative. When I first saw the sketches of this thing in the design studio way back when, the first thing that struck me was that it looked like a Bentley Mulsanne with a Jaguar grill on it.
Well, if you're going to steal.
Yeah, they have definitely, taken inspiration from good places. And I think, while it's not entirely original, it is very well executed. I will give them that. They've actually done a really nice job of integrating all the details. And, there's a lot of really nice details on this thing. Like, I particularly really like the way they've done the door handles. So you've got the strip of chrome along the bottom of the greenhouse, and the door handles, just sort of gently swell out of that strip of chrome on each of the doors. And when you look at it from a distance, you don't even see the door handles. It just all kind of blends into that chrome surround on the side glass. And it's only when you come up close that you realize that, there's a door handle here. And, it's not mechanical. There's a switch on the interior of the pocket of the door handle. So when you stick your hand in there to pull the door handle, you hit that switch and the door opens up, which means, of course, that in order for the door to open up, you've got to have battery power. And at least I think that there's a release, a mechanical backup release somewhere on the outside, and there's also one on the inside on the driver's door. There's actually a mechanical pull that's down in the map pocket on the lower part of the door, so you can, if the battery dies, or you have an electrical problem that prevents the electric switches from releasing the door, you can actually pull it manually and open the door.
Yeah,
so there's that.
I mean, that's a hot rodder thing too, though. There's been electrically operated door latches.
Oh yeah, the last couple of generations of Corvettes have those, and there's other cars that have that as well. But it's just it's kind of the way they've executed the whole thing is really quite nice. And it's a very upscale looking design. It's a more conservative design. And certainly compared to, I think, arguably its chief competitor is Cadillac. And I think it's a more conservative design than what you get with Cadillac. It doesn't really stand out from the crowd as much, but I think it's really well done. The interior is really nice. There's a lot of really nice detailing on the interior. The speaker grills, have these spirals of drilled holes, in a metal panel over the speakers. The seats, on this particular test car that I have, this is a Black Label edition, which is the high end edition, which comes when you buy a Lincoln Black Label model. They have just a few limited themes that you can choose from, and this one, the one I'm driving, they call it the Rhapsody in Blue. So you've got this dark blue exterior, blue and metallic and wood interior trim.
Blue leather.
Yeah, blue leather and
nice.
Blue. I don't know if it's Alcantara, some sort of suede like material on the headliner, that sort of thing. So it looks really good. It's a nice look. And there's a couple of other packages. I think there's a red and a black that are available.
You know what that sounds like? That sounds like a new version of the Bill Blass edition.
Kind of.
Because those were all blue and
yeah.
But also like I like that you're talking about the details, because that was always sort of from its inception, the Continental's thing was just very close attention to the details, and very nicely detailed as well. That's a big part of what made the Continental, especially like the Mark II, which is sort of the pinnacle of it. But just overall, it was always a sort of very well turned out car, very carefully considered design. And while it may be slightly derivative, or even more than slightly derivative, the criticisms we're hearing now about the Continental is kind of like the same stuff we heard about the Chrysler 300 when it first came out, because there's some of that similarity to the way they look. They have a bold grille and they're sort of squared off. But again, like,
if you look at the 300, it's a design that's actually aged very well.
Yeah,
and it still looks good now. Even more than a decade on. With it's evolved. It's changed and been incrementally updated every few years. But it's still a familiar look, but it has held up well over time.
Yeah, even the 05s look good though. Like if you were to go all the way back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suspect that this car will age equally well. And that's one of the advantages of going with a more conservative design. When you kind of step out there more with your design, you run the risk of several years down the road it doesn't look as good as it did when it was new.
Right.
So going with a more classic look, if you want to call it that, it often tends to hold up better over time.
Well, and every time I see one too, there a lot of liveries have them now because of our proximity to the airport. So every now and then when I see one, like it does jump out on the road, even though you think it might be conservative, it's still, it catches your eye. At least it catches my eye.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So how does it drive?
It drives good, drives really well. It's pretty heavy. At least, in this, the one that I have, is loaded with, everything. The front seats are like 30-way power adjustable, individually adjustable thigh supports for your left and right thigh. And I mean, it's kind of, maybe a little over the top there, but, it does have plenty of power. It's got the 3-liter GTDI V6 that is not an EcoBoost. Lincoln is no longer using the EcoBoost branding in order to help distinguish it from their more mainstream brethren at the Blue Oval. So they're now just GTDI V6s, so gasoline turbocharged direct injection.
Is that the only current use of a 3-liter version of that engine?
It's also in the MKs, available in the MKZ.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, and it's all-wheel drive, and it's in the Continental. The all-wheel drive system that they're using is based on the system that's in the Focus RS. So it's based on the so-called performance all-wheel drive. So it's capable of doing, directing all the torque to either axle as needed, as opposed to the system that they've previously had in the Fusion and MKZ and some other models, where basically it can only direct about 10 or 15% of the torque to the rear axle, just to give you a little bit of help. And it remains primarily a front wheel drive vehicle. This one is a full, nominally a 50-50 torque split, and then it can direct the torque to either end. And with 400 horsepower on tap and, roughly the same amount of torque, it's got plenty of grunt to move this car that weighs somewhere up north of 4,500 pounds. It's not
so
lightweight.
Heavy.
But it's
kind of, I guess, what it's supposed to be. If you're going to be classic Lincoln.
Yeah. And the thing is, when you start adding all these features on there, it adds weight, I mean, things like that panoramic sunroof.
Oh, those are so heavy.
Yeah. I mean, those adding a panoramic sunroof to a car, that's typically an extra 100 pounds that you're putting at the highest point of the car, for the worst, center of gravity. So, that's the sort of thing that, packs on the pounds on any car. So, in this one, it's got, plenty of performance. It doesn't feel like a hot rod Lincoln, even with 400 horsepower, but, it has no difficulty getting out of its own way.
It's adequate. Like we were talking about rolls last podcast.
It's more than adequate.
But does it feel like a Lincoln, or does it still just feel like a Fusion?
No, it definitely feels distinct from a Fusion. The Fusion, especially, compared to the Continental versus the MKZ, it definitely feels lighter on its feet and more nimble. The Continental definitely feels softer, a little softer, not floaty, in the classic Lincoln or Continental or Cadillac sense, none of the floatiness, but it definitely has a softer feel to it, even with the 20-inch wheels that are on this Black Label edition. So I think it feels like what you would expect the Lincoln to feel like. And when I was in New York in April for the auto show, they were actually shuttling us around to various events in a fleet of Continentals. So I also got to spend a fair bit of time in the backseat of the Continental, which is a very pleasant place to spend time, if you're not driving.
Well, and that's a perfect place to try that out and just see how it's going to do as a black car, a car service car in Manhattan.
Lincoln is now piloting in a couple of cities. They started in Miami, and I think they've expanded to San Diego, their chauffeur service. So what you can do, when you buy a new Continental, you get a certain number of hours of chauffeur service. So, for example, if you want to go out somewhere, go out for an evening, with your partner, and you don't want to drive, you want to be driven around. I think you get up to 6 hours of chauffeur service, and they have they've curated, they've hired drivers, professional drivers, and so you just call up and tell them where you want to be picked up, and they will come and they will drive your car for you. And so these are, they've been all background checked and curated, so you're getting somebody reliable, and they will drive you around so you can hang out in the back and relax.
So the analog lover in me thinks that is the most expedient, least expensive solution to autonomous vehicles is just hire guys to drive, personal drivers.
Right now, it may be the easiest, most expedient way. I think eventually, doing it autonomously will probably be cheaper than hiring drivers. And I suspect that, this, services like this are the kinds of things that car makers are experimenting with, trying to figure out what are the sorts of premium mobility services that they can offer in the future when they do have autonomous vehicles. Offering, a chauffeur service, that picks you up in something like a Continental, or some other very premium automated vehicle, 10 years from now, is a way that, it could distinguish, you could have a service that is distinguished from a run of the mill ride hailing service.
Yeah. I say it in jest, but it's always like, there's those two things. Like, do you want technology to solve this problem? Get ready to spend millions in years. Or do you want to just throw people at it? If you have the people to throw at it, that's the fast, cheap way to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It certainly is. It certainly is for today.
Yeah. So do you think it'll hold up as it sort of stays on the market? Because they're doing kind of a terrible job of letting everybody know that it's here.
Yeah. I haven't really seen any marketing for it.
I've seen none.
Yeah, it's, that's a problem. It's certainly selling better than the MKS did. But that's, not a very high bar.
Yeah. I mean, the MKS was another sort of like, yeah, it's a pretty nice car, but who knows it exists? I tell you what, because there's maybe people at Ford who listen that can help us out. I would be happy to take on the Lincoln account to do your advertising for you. We are results focused in direct response, so we won't take as much money. We'll just get you customers. We'll fill your sales funnel. How's that? Good call. Let me know. Hit me up.
All right.
I'll give you a finder's fee, Sam.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, overall, it's a really nice car. The Continental starts at, I think, a little under $50,000 for the base model with front wheel drive. The one, this Black Label edition, which was loaded with everything, and part of buying a Black Label Lincoln, you also get some other services. You get various concierge services as part of the deal. You get free car washes, at your Lincoln dealer, things like that. They'll come and pick the car up for service appointments. This one was $77,000, which is a bit steep.
Yeah, I mean, but there's Cadillacs that cost that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's, you compare it to a CT6, it's not out of line, and even, if you start comparing it to some of the German competitors, it's not a bad price, so, I think it's definitely worth taking a look if you're interested in a luxury sedan that is very comfortable, looks nice. It's not, it's not a sports sedan, and it doesn't have any pretense to being a sports sedan. It's definitely a classic luxury sedan. It's worth taking a look at. Okay.
So the other car that we wanted to talk about that you've been driving is the Buick LaCrosse.
Yeah. So the LaCrosse is, in many ways, very similar to the Continental, and yet different. As Lincoln has struggled over the past decade or so, it's often traditionally Lincoln was always compared to Cadillac. Those were the two chief competitors, and in recent years, as Cadillac has tried to move up market and compete with the Germans, oftentimes Lincoln was considered closer to Buick than to Cadillac.
Well, and I'll agree with that, especially since once they got rid of Mercury, Lincoln had that ability to sort of go down a little bit, and not necessarily on purpose, but just they could fill some of that space that Mercury had occupied without stepping on Mercury.
Right. And, So the LaCrosse is Buick's new flagship. It's their new large sedan. Maybe, arguably it might not actually be considered the flagship anymore in terms of sales and so on. That could arguably be considered the Enclave these days. But in terms of their cars, it's their flagship car. Starts at $32,000. And the one I drove was an all-wheel drive premium. And it's interesting. This is the second generation of the LaCrosse that's been built on GM's Epsilon platform. And this one, compared to the last one, that debuted around 2009, this one, it's very similar in size, but visually it looks very different, in terms of its proportions. It looks lower and wider, even though it's really not very much. But the way the metal is shaped, it's got a much more athletic stance to it. And, I think it's a really attractive car. It's a good looking car. And I was really impressed by its shape and its styling. I like the interior. It's certainly not, comparable to, in terms of, the materials and everything, to the Lincoln. But it's a really nice upscale sedan, that's at it's fairly reasonably priced. The one I drove, is about $47,000. Is powered by GM's 3.6 liter direct injected V6, which is a wonderful engine. It's got the cabin is really nice. One of the things I did like about the Buick better than the Lincoln is the belt line is a little bit lower. The Lincoln's belt line is really high, so if you are, inclined to drive with the window rolled down and your elbow up on the door on the windowsill, that's going to be a very uncomfortable position.
It's going to be up by your ear. Well,
yeah.
I actually thought about this while we were talking about it. I didn't want to bog us down too much, but I wonder if part of that weight of the Lincoln is they haven't necessarily moved to using as much high strength steel and just more state of the art. State of the art is such a crappy term, but more, I don't know, more sophisticated materials, I guess.
Well, that you're right. I mean, there's plenty of high strength steel in there, but the platform that the Lincoln is built on, the Ford CD platform. So it is a stretched version of, the underpinnings of the Fusion and MKZ. It's not the most weight efficient platform in the world. It was, even when it launched in 2012, and with the Fusion and the MKZ, it was on the heavier side of the segment. And now most of the competitors, and particularly GM's vehicles, have gotten significantly lighter. I mean, GM on every product that they've put out in the last 2-3 years has done a really impressive job on fundamental engineering, to bring down the weight of their cars, using a lot of really good multidisciplinary optimization in designing the structures of their cars. So, they haven't resorted to using, aluminum intensive structures or anything like that. There's some aluminum in there, there's some magnesium parts, but for the most part, it's steel. And what they've done is just done a lot of really smart design. And so, they've managed to shave, with each vehicle they've redesigned, cars and or SUVs, they've generally dropped by on average 250 to 300 pounds compared to the old ones, without getting smaller and without giving up any amenities and features.
Yeah,
so the same applies to this one. So it's it's significantly lighter than a Continental.
Yeah, I mean, they've been on a tear in terms of bringing that weight down, and I'm surprised actually that without I mean, I guess you don't really need alloys like aluminum necessarily, but you do use the different grades of steel, and you can put strength into the structure without mass or without as much mass. But one of the things that we're seeing with the downsizing of engines, and one of the things that's pushing us to smaller turbocharged 4-cylinders in a lot of places where they hadn't been before, is when you make that engine smaller, you can make everything around it smaller.
Exactly.
You can make the cradles lighter duty, like everything can get lighter.
Yep. It's a cascading effect. There's a virtuous circle there.
That's the term. They use that a lot at GM. Virtuous circle.
Well, yeah, it's and it's not just GM. I mean, it's there's two sides of the coin. You have a vicious cycle, where when things start to get worse, it cascades, in that direction. Or if you do things in a different way, one improvement can lead to numerous other improvements. So you can, by taking a holistic approach to the design, you can, if you reduce the size of the powertrain, now you can start taking weight out of other parts of the car that have to support that. So you can go to smaller, lighter brakes, smaller wheels, and, so it just cascades throughout the whole system.
Yeah. And it's it pays off. Cars drive better.
Yeah.
For it.
And one thing that was immediately noticeable to me in this LaCrosse compared to the last one I drove, which was several years back, the previous generation LaCrosse had really massive A-pillars, and forward visibility to the corners was pretty bad. And they have really slimmed those down on this one. So it's got much better visibility out of the car than the previous LaCrosse did.
Yeah, I mean, overall, this is a very significant upgrade for the LaCrosse. While it's a name that's been with us for a while now. It goes back to like the last of the W bodies was the LaCrosse, the first gen. It's matured with every step. The last LaCrosse was a good car. It got kind of old. They've replaced it with a car that's fully competitive. I worry that it doesn't have a place, though. Like you've got the Impala that's same basic car, also very good. What kind of argument does the Buick make for itself? Is it in that area of the market that's just under incredible pressure because people are moving to the actual full-on luxury brands, full-on premium brands, and these in-between brands like Buick and Acura, just they have nowhere to go.
Well, and it's not just, it's not just the other brands. It's also the fact that it's a 4-door sedan.
Right. Well, there's that too.
And that's a rapidly shrinking marketplace, a rapidly shrinking segment, both, mids. Well, I mean, at any size, sedans, cars in general are in trouble. I was at an event yesterday. Cox Automotive did their mid-year review of what's going on in the marketplace and here in Detroit, and they showed a chart showing the segment winners and losers, where the gains are in various segments, and the biggest loss by far of any segment was mid-sized cars, which year over year down like 2.25% this year, down to their lowest market share in a long time of less than 11%. I mean, that used to be the by far the biggest segment, car segment in the U.S. market, and it's only getting worse. And especially this is an area where Ford has a problem right now because it's going to be at least a couple more years before the Fusion is completely redesigned, and Toyota is just now launching an all new Camry, which by all accounts is significantly improved from the previous one. Much better to drive. It's far more fuel efficient. The Camry hybrid is rated at 53 miles per gallon now. Almost as much as a Prius. And on the other, going back to yesterday with the data from Cox, SUVs and pickup trucks are the big gainers, as we all know. And so for a car like the LaCrosse, as good as it is, it's going into a segment that customers are fleeing from. Yeah.
So we can lament it, or we can just, we can say like, oh, that's a shame. And it's about all we can do. It's good. Everybody's going to crossovers kind of, in the North American market, in Europe as a whole, people like them. And It reminds me of how there were so many, deriders of the minivan when minivans were really popular in the 80s and 90s. Everybody hated them. It was popular to hate them. And that's fine, I guess, as far as it goes, but they're the product for the times. And so while this, like you say, the cars are in trouble, the sedans are in trouble, the crossovers are not. So as long as you've got crossovers.
That's why it's going to be very interesting to watch, this fall when the new Regal arrives, because, they're adding what is nominally a station wagon, but they're calling it a crossover. Because, it sits an inch higher and has, black wheel arches. So,
I love that thing, by the way. I think it's fantastic. It's just yay.
Yeah. So I'll be fascinated to watch how that one, how consumers accept that one, because, really, it's a station wagon,
it is,
not
but
a utility,
but on the other hand too, like if everybody's got same, and you come into a niche with something that's different, it's I know that there's the Outback and there's like the Volkswagen Golf all track,
or
whatever thing,
all road, I think.
No, anyway.
Yeah, whatever.
Now there's
Audi's the all road.
Audi's
VW is the all track. Yeah.
Either way, there's only a couple of different choices there. So now and Subaru has seen its volume just grow really incredibly.
And,
so
I think it's absolutely the right move for Buick to make, to do the Regal Tour X, and push it as a crossover, because I think that will get American consumers' attention, and I think they'll look past the fact that yes, it's a station wagon. But
it's a cool station wagon,
It is, yeah.
And it's just dressed up for the event that is this market right now. I don't know. I hope it does well. And I don't think it really matters to Buick if it does well or if it stiffs, because they're making money in other places, and they don't necessarily need the cars to make money here. I mean, they do, but they don't.
Well, yeah. I mean, the bulk of their sales are in China.
Yeah.
And, if, even if they only sell, if they sell 40,000 Regals next year, that's twice as many as they sold the last 2 years.
That's not bad.
So they don't have to gain very much or they don't have to sell a huge number to have a huge gain. I think they're definitely moving in the right direction. And, it's unfortunate for the LaCrosse, because as good as the LaCrosse is, I think it's probably not going to find a huge market here in North America.
Well, yeah, and I wonder what their expectations and hopes are for it. Maybe they only hope for so much anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they've got projections out there that maybe they've shared. I also wonder
they never share their targets, their sales targets.
Sometimes they dance around them if you ask. But I actually wonder what the Regal Tour X is going to do to Volvo, because Volvos have gotten expensive, and while they've reintroduced a wagon to the market, the Regal offers comparable style, certainly not the same build quality and luxury, but 70% of it, maybe 75, more than that, at a price that's going to be a lot more appealing to people who would consider the Volvo but can't afford it. So there may be, it may suck some of the air out of that room. I don't know. We'll see. But do you want to talk about a crossover before we move on?
I do.
All right.
And especially with the one you're driving.
I've been very impressed. I've got the Mazda CX-9. I've got the Signature, so it's very nice. It's very well equipped. It's the fully equipped CX-9. Mazda really took notes from BMW 10 years ago. I feel like there's a lot of like E90 in this car. Just the way everything is designed, the way it behaves. They paid very careful attention to it. So it's not just a collection of parts thrown into a crossover kind of shape, and off you go. It's very carefully tuned. I was really paying attention to how the suspension, the ride quality, it very, very well filters out all that high frequency stuff, but it's also not floaty. So it has that sort of supple, controlled ride that's hard to do. And when you're selling sort of a crossover in Mazda's end of the market, nobody cares except for people that do. But just generally, it's that sort of, it's a very highly burnished vehicle. Just the amount of the steering torque that you have to put into it is just like perfectly weighted. It's very fluid. There's not a lot of it doesn't feel like too heavy or too light, and it's got a sport button which makes the steering a little heavier. So that's pleasant. Its turbo engine is very punchy, and it's responsive, and it sounds good. The thing that I think left the biggest impression was how quiet it is, because Mazdas tend to be a little bit on the loud side inside. This is a very upscale car.
Yeah, and Mazda has been, over the last couple of years, they've made moves to try and get a more premium perception for their vehicles. They want to move up market because they know that they're never going to be a huge volume player, and so they're not even trying to be. And they know that there's limits on what they can do. With the whole performance thing. They still want to be seen as drivers' cars. But they want to be more premium drivers' cars.
Yeah, and the CX-9 is a car that it'll satisfy a driver, but it's also you run it out of its talent, not because it's bad or it's poorly set up chassis. I think most of it is tires, but it's not hard to find the understeer limit. But it's fine. It's controllable. On ramps are fun still, even as the front end pushes a little wide, you just lift your foot off, it tucks. I was surprised at it's a little greasy here. But it's good up to about 7/10. And you can hit that 7/10 in everyday driving. You don't have to be doing something asinine to hit it, which is why I'm talking about it, because I was able to actually, as an enthusiast driver, enjoy myself without doing anything illegal or, dangerous. So props for that. That's hard to do.
Yeah, no, I drove the CX-9 last fall, and I was also very impressed with it. And, it's a handsome looking vehicle, for what it is, a big crossover like that. The Mazda design language has translated very well to a wide variety of different vehicle types now. Oh yeah,
it's very premium looking, both inside and out, which is one of the things that Hyundai and Kia have been very aggressive about, is giving you world-class premium design at not necessarily not premium prices.
Right.
So they've opened up sort of. Why should you have to suffer with bad design, even though you're not buying a luxury car? So I like that, and I like that here as well. I like the way the signature model trim of the CX-9 is equipped. It's a little pricey for what it is. I mean, it's $45,000, $44,000, but then again, it starts much lower if you're not buying this trim level, and it has everything. So if you were thinking of a BMW X5 or an Audi Q5 or something like that, but you couldn't get over that price hump or you didn't want to, you're going to find pretty much most of that satisfaction here in the Mazda, and maybe more, because it's just, that much more affordable, and you don't really give up anything, other than some brand cachet. And I don't know. I was just trying to think.
Mazda's brand, I don't think you're giving up a whole lot there. It's a good brand, and I think it's pretty highly regarded.
Yeah. I mean, the tech is very carefully studied. It does a pretty good imitation of iDrive to a certain degree, and I guess that's sort of damning it with faint praise. It's just good to keep comparing it to stuff because it's good on its own. It's Mazda. They've gotten free from Ford. They've found their identity. They're making really great stuff, and this is just another example. And the fact that it has 3 rows sort of tucked in there is like a bonus because it's not that physically large. I guess it's about the same size as the original CX-9 that was based on the Ford Edge, but it seems like it's more space efficient. It's lighter on its feet. It's just overall it's a massive improvement, and it's equipped this way. It's a luxury car, and Mazda never launched their luxury brand, but this is what it would be if they had.
Yeah, I mean now they're shifting the whole brand to that sort of near luxury, more premium feel, and for their current generation of vehicles, everything they've done in the last several years, has had really nicely executed interiors, really good fit and finish and materials. It feels more expensive. It doesn't feel cheap at all. And, you mentioned the infotainment, like iDrive, it's got the central control knob, which, I like that approach. And I think it works really well in that vehicle.
Yeah, all together. I mean, it's just fantastically well executed. Everybody go buy Mazdas so they keep making cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so we've talked about cars. Now we should talk about some other stuff. Now that it's been 43 minutes. And for once we don't really have, we can't talk smack about Uber. So we can talk smack about Tesla.
Yeah. So, we actually had this on the list for last week. This is actually some news from last week, and we didn't get around to it because we had a bunch of other stuff. But Chris Lattner is a really brilliant software engineer who he left Apple in early January of this year. And while he was at Apple, during his more than a decade there, he developed a whole new programming language called Swift, which has been really highly regarded since it came out a couple of years ago. And he decided to move on, try some new challenges. And when he left Apple, he went up the road from Cupertino to Palo Alto to join Tesla as their new head of autopilot software development. Because their previous head of autopilot, Sterling Anderson, left there to go form his own startup. And so Lattner went in there, and now less than 6 months after joining Tesla, he has left. And in his announcement on LinkedIn, basically he said that he acknowledged that he wasn't a good fit with Tesla and their management. And I think, given, if you look at Tesla's history over the years, they've had a lot of turnover, especially at the upper ranks, with people that have to work more closely with a certain CEO that they have. I've known quite a number of people that have formerly worked there and had to work directly for Elon Musk. And let's just say he's not an easy man to work for.
But and not to aggrandize Elon any more than he already has himself, but a lot of guys who are really smart and really driven and change the world are not easy to work for. I mean, Steve Jobs wasn't easy to work for.
True. Certainly, to Elon's credit, I've never heard anybody accuse him of any of the kinds of things that Travis Kalanick has done. I mean, he's not he's not a misogynistic, sexist pig. But he's also not easy to be around, and he has very high expectations. And like you say, a lot of CEOs do that. But I think he's also, tends to set a lot of very unrealistic expectations. And it sounds like he wanted a lot more from autopilot than Lattner felt was perhaps possible. And so he's gone his separate ways from Tesla, and we'll see where he lands next. Perhaps at one of the 6,000 autonomous driving startups in Silicon Valley right now.
Or he could just go be a driver.
Yeah, there's that. Well, after 11 or 12 years at Apple, he earned a few stock options, and so I'm sure he's in no immediate need of getting another job just yet. But if for anybody that's interested in learning more about Chris Lattner, the guys over at the Accidental Tech Podcast did a really good interview. They had him on as a guest back in January, and we'll throw a link to that in the show notes for this. It's definitely worth a listen. Some interesting conversation, especially if you're into software development and the really geeky technology stuff. So speaking of geeky technology stuff and self-driving, the other news item I think we've got is Waymo. Well, actually, both Waymo and Apple in the past week have done deals with car rental companies.
Yeah, and you had an interesting tweet about that. Was sort of just the idea that the rental companies, like the rental companies, are going to be important to self-driving or autonomous mobility as that comes up as a thing.
Yeah, certainly. Even when you've got autonomous vehicles, even if they're electric, they're still going to need, some basic maintenance and service from time to time. They're going to need new brakes and tires and wiper blades and windshield washer fluid. And actually, in the case of autonomous cars, probably a whole lot of windshield washer fluid to keep all those sensors clean. But they will need basic maintenance. And, for tech companies like Waymo and potentially Apple, they have no infrastructure for providing vehicle service or maintenance right now. And so, these deals that Waymo has made with Avis and Apple with Hertz make perfect sense. If they're going to get into the business of providing autonomous mobility services, for traditional automakers, they have networks of dealers that can do this sort of thing as well. So they don't need to go to car rental companies. They can use their dealer networks, which would, for the dealers would help offset, some of the losses, in terms of consumer sales that they would have got, those losses that are going to go away, those sales that are going to go away as people shift to automated mobility services, by getting into the business of servicing those vehicles for their automaker partners. That's a new business, new revenue stream for those guys.
Think about that. Just how many automakers use fleet now as this sort of like dumping ground, flotation device for cars, and to turn that on its head and have the fleets, the rental companies, actually sort of be the saviors of the automakers to a degree, because they're the ones who actually touch the greasy bits, and then you've got the autonomous providers putting themselves together with that. Like, it seems like everybody can find it's that terrible word synergy, but that's exactly what it is. Like, everybody has their little niche, and if they partner up just right, it'll work. And the Avis deal was interesting too. I was reading the MIT Technology Review. I've forgotten that Avis bought into Zipcar, so they have some of the on-demand reservation stuff figured out a little bit more through Zipcar than not the traditional like Avis rental desk. They've got that Zipcar experience to draw from.
Right. Yeah. So that they've got that short-term rental business, with Zipcar. They've got a huge network of service facilities, not just in the United States, but throughout the world, really. I mean, they operate in many countries around the world. So by partnering with a company like Waymo, wherever Waymo, sets up shop and starts providing mobility services with their autonomous vehicles, when those vehicles need service, they can they can drive themselves to an Avis outlet, to get their tires rotated, or, add air to the tires, or, whatever else needs to be done.
That's going to, maybe everything will be okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. The buggy whip manufacturers eventually found something new to do. And, carriage makers, did something, found other businesses. So, everybody will find a new niche somewhere eventually. There's probably going to be some pain along the way as people try to figure out what is the right niche. And, some businesses are going to grow and some are going to shrink, but, that's just the nature of changing, as
that's an economy
changes. Yeah. As the economy changes, everybody's got to find a new place in that ecosystem.
Because I work in advertising, which is sort of a young-ish industry, and it's kind of youth obsessed. I've wound up now as one of the elder statesmen in the office, so I occasionally say wise things. And one of the things I've reminded my colleagues of, and on a regular basis, is look, the only constant is change. And it sounds really profound. It's also like half nonsense, but it's true. Like, you can't just expect us to have this sort of, automotive landscape that we had for, the last 40 years. It's going to change, and consumer tastes are going to change. You've got this large generation coming up now. They're starting to hit their 30s. They're starting to express their economic might, but they've still got challenges where, home ownership, building families, mobility out into the suburbs. It's not necessarily on their plate because of the way they're saddled with some debt and stuff. And I'm making sweeping generalizations here, but that's all really setting the stage for this stuff.
They've got college debt, and that's becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
Yeah. You can't get rid of that. You can't even declare bankruptcy. That's it. You have that debt.
Right. And, on the transportation side, affordability is becoming a real problem.
Right.
As vehicles become more and more expensive and take up a bigger percentage of your paycheck, especially when you factor in all the elements of it, not just acquiring the vehicle, but also putting fuel in it, paying for insurance and maintenance and everything else. Affordability is an issue. And, one of the interesting conversations yesterday in this Cox event I went to was, around the length of financing terms, loan terms.
Oh, they're brutal now. They're
72 and 84 month loans for cars, are increasingly common. And in fact, in Canada, I guess 96 month loans are even common now. And,
that's a 72-month loan in metric. That's
well, okay. But
I'm sorry.
The thing is, when you take out a loan that long on a car, it's, you're almost, looking at like mortgage length, mortgage length loan. But the problem is your house doesn't depreciate the way a car does. And so, one of the big issues is, if you pretty much are locked into staying with that car for a much longer period of time if you decide to go down that path, because you can't afford to get out of that loan. You're going to be underwater for a significant portion of the period of that loan. The car is going to be worth less than what you owe on it.
Right.
So that's, I think that's going to be one of the factors that drives people more towards mobility services as an option, where you have on-demand vehicle access.
Well, yeah, I think it already is. I think what you're going to see, because the folks that I know that are in that situation, they lease, they don't buy, or they buy used, because
the problem is even leasing is becoming less attractive too,
right?
Because the gap between lease payments and loan payments is actually shrinking, because loan payments are going down because of the extended length loans. But lease payments are going up, and that's in part due to that depreciation. The retained value of vehicles is declining, especially vehicles from the last 5 or 6 years has gone down. So the residual value of those cars is not what it was, several years ago. And in part, we were discussing this. In part, that may be due to the technology that's in these cars, because, once you put technology into vehicles, it doesn't change. And, it's quickly, it's often becoming obsolete long before the rest of the car is. So that may be acting as an where it was once thought to be something that added value to the car. On a used car, it may actually be depressing the value of the car.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it adds value at that initial sale, and then after that, it doesn't necessarily. Right. So think about that though. The long borrowing terms. That's almost feels like it's a Hail Mary on the part of automakers, like a last hurrah, to just keep things the way they were. Because the other thing is, these folks have been out there, they've been working for 5, 7, 8 years now. Like, I keep hearing how they're being painted as like self-centered or selfish or entitled. And it's like, no, they've been working for a while and they like nice stuff, because who doesn't like nice stuff? So it's going to become about like, okay, if you can't swing the ownership of the nice thing, but you want to have experiences when you go out, well, when you go to do things, how do you work that? And so one of those things will be, everybody loves Uber, right? Because you get picked up in a pretty nice car, and it's it's a decent service. It's easy to use. It's not, some weird cab driver. It's instead it's a weird Uber driver. But overall, like the sort of the quality of the experience is higher. And I don't begrudge that to people. Yeah. That's just how it is.
So, kind of shifting gears a little bit and going in the extreme opposite direction.
Well, you mentioned buggy whips. You mentioned buggy whips.
Exactly. And so we're not quite going back that far, but there's a really cool event that's been going on this week. It's an annual event called the Great Race, and it's a road rally for classic cars, and it happens every year. And every year they take a different route. This year, to compete in the Great Race, cars have to have been built in no later than 1972. So we're talking, 45 years and older. And this year's Great Race started last Saturday. It's Thursday night as we record. It started last Saturday, June 24th in Jacksonville, Florida, and it ends this Sunday in Traverse City, Michigan. And they're covering about 2,200 miles with these cars, over 140 cars. And the oldest car in the fleet that's competing this year is a 100-year-old car, a 1917 Peerless. With a V8 engine. And, imagine driving 2,200 miles in a 100-year-old open top car. I mean, this is a big, giant roadster. It's nicknamed the Green Dragon. And it's been driven by Jonathan. Why have I a brain fart of his name? From Haggerty Insurance. Haggerty's got 2 cars that they've entered in the race, the Green Dragon and also a 1960 Plymouth Fury that are driven by a couple of other Haggerty employees. But the car this evening, the cars rolled in here into Ypsilanti, and they were all gathered in the street in Depot Town here in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and got to go down there and take a walk around some of these cars. Some amazing cars running this year. Everything from an old Subaru 360, this tiny,
the little teeny thing,
car. Yeah. There's a Volvo P1800, a couple of Mustangs, a big old Rolls Royce, the Green Dragon, of course, and a lot of other great class. Oh, there's a beautiful E-Type Roadster that was pulling in just as I got down there this evening.
Is there there's a badass looking 450 SLC or something too, right?
Yep, a 450 SLC, and also a 1972 Nissan Skyline GTR.
Oh, that's a Ken Mary, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the first generation GTR, the 2-liter twin cam inline 6. Cool looking car. There was also a couple of other slightly newer Skylines, 4-door Skylines that were there that were running along as support vehicles for one of the Japanese teams. But it was a pretty amazing event. And if you ever get a chance to see it, definitely check it out. And we'll put up a gallery of some photos along with the post for this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's just cool. Like, you see all these cars, especially the older ones, like the stuff from the teens. You see them either like parked on a field or in a magazine or whatever, but to like just see them in operation and hear them run and just look around at the engineering, is that while they're old, some of the ways problems were solved on those cars and just the way they were designed and built is just fascinating. And you never see it. To see it running and in operation and being used, it's like one of the coolest things.
Well, and that's probably the best thing about this. It's one thing to walk through a museum and look at old classic cars, but to actually see these things running, cross country, 100-year-old car driving over 2,000 miles, over the course of a little more than a week, that is cool. I mean, that is the way cars should be. They should be on the road being driven.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. You got to use it. I mean, they don't like to sit, even newer cars. Like, the worst thing I ever did for any of my cars was just let them sit for long periods of time. It's terrible for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Use them.
Oh, and probably the most valuable car in the race this year, a Toyota 2000 GT.
Yeah, that's
cool to see that on the road. That's amazing. I mean, only 351 of those were built.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good for you, whoever owns that you're, because at the end of the day, like, even if something bad happens, like, it's a car, like, it's cool. It's a historical piece. You don't want anything bad to happen, but you also can't enjoy it while you just sit there and stare at it. They don't do anything. So you got to use it.
If anything does happen and you're insured with Haggerty Insurance, they will take care of you. I'm told. I have excellent customer service.
I have heard nothing but good things about.
Yeah, I mean, they're the biggest insurer of classic cars. They specialize in just insuring classic cars. Yeah,
and that's a whole other thing where you want somebody who knows what they're doing. Like agreed value coverage and stuff. And so now that I'm talking about insurance, I don't know what I'm talking about. So we should stop and just say, check out the Hemmings Facebook page as well. They've got a bunch of pictures from the Great Race as well as other stuff. And yeah, we'll definitely have pictures that we'll put up. And let's move on to questions or anything. We do have a couple of questions. Let's see, on Twitter, Lansdale Arch asks, am I crazy to buy a used BMW non-CPO, a 2014 328i? I figure still 1 year of warranty to find out. No.
What do you think?
No, I mean, if it looks like it spent the last couple of years at the bottom of a lake, move on. Every car is an individual, so check it over. But no, I mean...
Yeah. Well, and especially if you've still got a year of warranty left on it, it's probably worth taking a shot at, because, one of the advantages to buying non-CPO is it will be quite a bit cheaper. Going the certified pre-owned route, where it's been reconditioned by the manufacturer or a contractor for the manufacturer, and you do get a warranty on it, but you also pay a price premium for that. And so you're going to get a better deal on this. And if it still has some warranty left on it, you have an opportunity to find out and maybe unload it before that warranty completely expires and starts the thing starts costing you a lot of money.
Yeah. And it's a 318 he was saying?
328.
A 328.
So that'd be a 2-liter turbo, 2014 328. I think is a 2-liter turbo. So yeah, no, you're probably fine.
It doesn't.
What could possibly go wrong?
It doesn't strike me as anything terrible.
Yeah.
Check it out.
They're generally pretty reliable. And yes, BMW parts and service is going to be more expensive than, for, some other brands, but it's a shot.
So I will give a shameless plug to my friends at FCP Euro. They helped me maintain all of my European cars for 20 years. They've run a fantastic operation. They have good prices. They stand behind their parts. They're an excellent company to do business with. And they sponsor, racing and stuff. And so if you buy the BMW, check out FCP Euro. for the parts.
And tell them that Dan from Wheelbearings sent you.
That's right. And we have no affiliation other than I'm a satisfied customer. But, the parts for BMWs, even all the way up to through the E90s, the parts aren't really that expensive. They're, so every car has like those very expensive pieces, but overall the general wear items, they're not that much. BMWs, you have to watch out for the plastic in the cooling system and stuff like that. But it's maintenance. And if you're paying somebody to do it, plan on spending a little bit. But, if you find a specialist or if you do it yourself, you probably, you'll be okay. You're saving some money on the actual like purchasing of the car. And, they are a high quality car. They do last a while as long as they don't rust. So don't hit stuff and don't let it rust. You'll be fine. Just keep fixing it.
All right. And then from Jeff on Facebook, thoughts on BMW dropping the manual from the 2 Series?
Makes me sad. I understand it. I'm just sad.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's just a general trend. Increasingly customers don't want manual transmissions, especially here in the U.S. But even in Europe, a lot of drivers are moving away from manuals to automatics. And so, if people don't want to buy them, it doesn't make sense for the manufacturers to engineer them. And also it's become more complex for manufacturers to do the emissions and fuel economy certification with manuals than it is with automatics. With manuals or with automatics, they can program the shift points and everything, to optimize the fuel economy and the emissions so they do well in the tests. And you can't do that on a manual. It's just a lot harder to do and hit those increasingly difficult targets. So I think BMW and every other brand are increasingly going to have fewer and fewer manual transmissions.
They're slowly sucking the life out of us.
Yep.
I'm going to have to find some new hobby.
All right.
We have one more question, actually, from Facebook. William Pittman, as cars are being taught to drive safer, will they also learn how to crash and break down? For example, in the case of a mechanical failure, will they know that they should not stop in certain places, even at the price of exacerbating the damage? That's a good question.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. And the answer is yes. They, I think they will, try to get the vehicle, the vehicles will try to get themselves into a safe place, both, so that they're out of the way of other traffic. And also, if there's a rider in the vehicle, you want to get them to a safe location, where when they get out of the vehicle, they're not, not likely to, or less likely to get hit by another vehicle on the street, on the road. So yeah, I think they will be biased towards safety rather than self-preservation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the things that we actually have to teach people about too, is, like, hey, if you get a flat, don't stop in the middle of the lane on a multi-lane highway. Like, drive on the rim. Don't worry about the tire. Like, it's just a tire. Just whatever. Just get to your safety and then deal with it.
You mean you shouldn't stop in the middle of an intersection for something like that?
Not unless you want to get clobbered. But I mean, I understand. Like, hey, I don't want to damage the thing, but you like balance it. Like, my kids are going to start driving soon. I'm sure you had this discussion with your kids. Like, look, use your head. Mm-hmm. I don't care if you trash the wheel or, you make some little bit of the part of the car worse by getting yourself to safety. A, it's only a car. B, like,
those parts can be replaced.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to replace a wheel than a leg.
Yeah. I mean, even if the car burns to the ground, so what? Get out.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, fine. So yeah, but that's an interesting question. How you sort of like allow the car to damage itself, because it winds up being like Hal, right? Like,
yeah,
it's like, I'm sorry, Dave, can't do that. We're stuck here. All right. Well,
we did have one email question that actually came in a couple of days ago.
Fancy.
Yeah. So somebody taking the more challenging route and did it without prompting from us.
They sent carrier pigeons.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So Teamer asks, you guys don't think much of the UK Top Gear. You guys don't think much of the UK Top Gear. Now the Grand Tour. Dan even went as far as calling those hosts clowns. I'm not the biggest fan myself, as the show spends most time trying to entertain housewives rather than car enthusiasts. What do you think of Motor Trend's video efforts? Do you think they deserve praise for making the right content for us car guys? And what could they do better? Will their business model be viable in the long run? You want to respond to that first?
I get the impression you don't want to touch that. I mean, to look, if you like it, that's cool. I haven't watched that much of it. This is going to sound funny coming from someone who's, hosted podcasts for like 10 years, but like, I'm not so much into this sort of like, what celebrities have to say about stuff. Yeah. Jeremy Clarkson was much better when it was Top Gear about cars. When he would do the segments, one of the first Top Gear segments I ever saw was about the Rover P5s or P6, just hearing him deliver a treatise about that car in sort of the old format, not challenging his pals to some race across Malaysia. That was much better to me. You're offering something up from in an entertaining way, from an informed perspective. I'm not so much for the build shows. The roadkill stuff is interesting to me just because it's sort of like, it's ratty and like, hey, here's the stuff you could do. But it's also kind of like, I think it had you're boxing yourself in, I suppose, where everything has to be kind of half-assed and nasty. And build shows don't really do it for me. I was never a huge fan of like the build shows on cable. Motor Trend has a base of people that want to watch their stuff. They want to watch Johnny Lieberman drive around and talk. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, as far as the Grand Tour goes, I only watched the first 3 episodes and then gave up.
I just thought it was boring.
Yeah, I did too, and I thought, especially the whole celebrity thing, the celebrity brain explosion thing, was just silly. And a lot of the segments were just straight up rehashes of things they'd been doing on Top Gear for the last 10 years. And, while it was funny at first, it was funny back before it was cool. You
sound like such a hipster now. Like, I watched it before it was cool.
Yeah, well, I did.
Yeah, so did I.
But the thing is, you can only keep repeating that same thing for so long before it does get kind of boring, and, I haven't seen the current BBC Top Gear version. So I can't really comment on that one. I don't know if you've watched that one, Dan.
So the last season, they were running them in the UK first, and then they would release them here on BBC America. And so BBC America gave me some access to the episodes, and I thought they actually did a really good job at respinning the show and making it entertaining. I watched the first episode. That's the one with, Matt LeBlanc and a couple of other British guys. I don't know, Rory, someone.
Chris Harris was in there.
Chris Harris is on, and Chris Harris is good.
Is great. I always liked the videos that he did, before he was doing Top Gear. I haven't seen the Top Gear stuff, but I think, he's got a good, a good style, a good personality for that sort of thing.
And it's again, it's like, it's not that I hang on their every word. It was entertaining. It was well put together. They clearly have some chemistry. And, I started watching the first episode, and I didn't intend to watch it all the way through. I watched the whole damn thing. So I thought to myself, okay, there's something here if it kept my attention. So I think that's good. I know that they're coming out with Top Gear America. It doesn't look interesting to me, but I mean, check it out, see if you like it. Far be it for me to throw stones, Yeah,
I mean, one of the things I always liked about the older Top Gear, through the past decade, was they did a lot of great cinematography. There was a lot of good film work there,
and that was actually what attracted.
It looked visually really cool. Yeah, and the personality meshing between those 3 guys, between Hammond, May, and Clarkson, was fun. But it has gotten kind of old, and it's just not very interesting anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you got people say like, "I'll have the Jag." It's like, shut up.
Yeah,
shut up.
And as for Motor Trend, I haven't really watched the Roadkill stuff. I occasionally watch some of the other stuff with Johnny and Jason. And they've actually done, they've gotten really good at the camera work, and there's a lot of really good visuals in there. And, I like Johnny. I like his style. I don't watch it a lot.
I love to argue with Johnny.
Yeah. I don't always agree with all of Johnny's opinions either, but
but he does always make interesting points.
Yeah. As for whether their business model is viable in the long run, who knows? I mean, we'll see.
I mean, I
don't know all the details of their business model and how much they're actually generating. I mean, if they're, I think, a subscription model, is probably the better approach, because, doing video, and doing high quality video is hard. It's
very expensive
and very expensive, especially for the kind of stuff that they're doing. I mean, that's why we haven't really delved into that yet, because, if you're going to do it, you're better off. I'd prefer to do it right and, have some good quality stuff rather than just something that's half-assed.
Yeah.
And so, the Motor Trend guys have done some really good high quality stuff. And so, that takes some financial support to do that. And they seem to be getting it. And whether they can continue to do that, we'll see.
I mean, as long as if that business model is viable, as long as you have an advertiser who's willing to pay for it, things are looking up in terms of keeping advertisers. If you already have established relationships like, Motor Trend and its sort of parent organization has, they have the ear of advertisers. They have all the research on their subscribers, their user base, their audience. You can go out and you can get a pitch. You can make that argument. You can say our stuff attracts these people. Video is a very smart play now because the world is going mobile first, and video is great on mobile, and it is interacted with at a much higher rate than print. Or even just like blog posts. So yeah, it's a smart place to be, and I think that's why you're seeing everybody go there. What we're going to see, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years is we're going to have this bloom of sort of rich content, right? Like podcasts, which are also on the upswing again. They're sort of having a renaissance, and video content as well. Some of it's just like there's just too much, so some of it's just going to die off because it's not getting the audience. It doesn't have the right sales effort behind it to get sponsorship, and it's it'll atrophy. So enjoy it while it lasts, and it'll continue to evolve. But at a certain point, I think the amount of stuff out there is just going to narrow again, just through sort of attrition. That's my treatise on that.
and as the advertising guy, I will let you have the last word on that.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I think we'll let the listeners have the last word on the podcast by going to iTunes and giving us a review, because that helps us, show up to more people. If you tell everybody that you like our podcast. If you don't like it, email us directly.
Yeah, that's right. Share it directly with us, and we'll try to do something about it. And if you love the show, then tell the world on iTunes or wherever else you listen to podcasts, and share it on Twitter and Facebook and whatever other social media you have. You can email us. There's a link on the wheelbearings.media site where you can subscribe to the show for free. No charge there. And I think that's about it for this week, right, Dan?
I believe so. So thanks for listening.
All right. See you later.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.